Welcome.
All right, howdy, folks. My name is Tony. Um, my online moniker has been the Big Data Pimp since 2004, something like that, 2003. Um, we got a thunderstorm coming in. I am a licensed private pilot. I am not current at the moment. I would like to, but flying's expensive. I have completed all of my coursework for an aviation management bachelor's degree, and I have my associates in aviation. I have been interested in airplanes and flying since I was a very small child. I started flying drones while I was working on my bachelor's in aviation management. I initially started with GPS gimbal drones, or at least a cheap one. It was a Cheerson CX-20, I believe. But after I graduated and a couple years later, I found out that FPV was something that existed. And ever since then, minus this last almost year because of life, I've been flying almost every day. This last year, I moved and a whole bunch of other stuff, so things have gotten, I haven't flown as much as I would like to. I do have a DJI Mavic Mini, a Mini 2, so I fly that occasionally to get some photos of the sunset or photos of my property, especially now that I've moved to Tennessee and I have 4 acres. I fly FPV because it's incredibly fun. It's a huge mental health benefit for myself and people like me. It is a massive stress reliever. It is a glorious state of peace of mind for a few minutes at a time that lets you disconnect from everything but your drone. Why am I saying all this? What am I giving you my history for, right? I want to talk about remote ID. Remote ID is something being forced down by the Federal Aviation Administration here in the United States. For those of you who don't know what remote ID is, and for some of those of you who think you know what remote ID is, what is remote ID? Well, as the name suggests, it's a form of remote identification, right? So it's being able to identify something from a distance. In this case, remote controlled aircraft. I think that a lot of people, including the AMA, entered into this through extreme ignorance and good faith. They thought that the term drone would be limited to multi-rotor aircraft, not all remote control aircraft. Everything under 55 pounds and over 250 grams, or 250 grams and over, I should say, is classified as an SUAS by the FAA. What is an SUAS? It's a small, uncrewed aircraft or aerial system. That means that your foam gliders, your turbine model jets, your RC helicopters, electric or gas, anything that flies and has a remote control attached to it that's under 55 pounds and is 250 grams or heavier is an SUAS in the eyes of the FAA. So that means, according to the FAA, you have to go online and take a test to prove that you're safe to fly that and you know the regulations. Pretty lame, but if it stopped there, maybe we could tolerate that. It also means that if you want to use that aircraft, whether it's a multi-rotor drone or a just foam airplane with a camera on it, for anything whatsoever that could be considered a commercial purpose. And according to the FAA, that means in furtherance of a business. So it doesn't mean you get paid necessarily. It just means anything that promotes a business, and that business could be a church. That's considered an 107 operation, and you need to have your FAA Part 107 certificate, which is basically a commercial pilot's license for drones. That's pretty wild as well. The FAA wants everyone now, to have a transponder on every one of their remote control aircraft. This transponder beacon will transmit not only the position of the aircraft, where it is, but also the takeoff location of that aircraft, and in most cases, it's required to show the location of the controlling station, so where the pilot is at as well. The FAA calls this a digital license plate. I entirely disagree with that, because that's bullshit. Because a license plate does not transmit my home address when I drive out of my driveway and go places. It doesn't tell the world my home address, where I'm going to be returning to. It doesn't tell the world my home address. There's also nothing that logs how many miles, or how regularly I use a certain road, or any of that other stuff. A license plate doesn't broadcast anything. A license plate is a piece of tin that's screwed to your car bumper. It doesn't transmit anything. The average person out on the road can only tell that it's a piece of, hang on, I have one, hang on. I know I have one around here, hang on. I have a few, as a matter of fact. Apologize, I can't find it. So what I'm going to do, we're going to go over here to my car. So, I want to show you my license plate number. Oh wait, that's right. Most of you aren't cops. Those of you who are, it's kind of most illegal for you guys to just look up my license plate number for no reason. But anyway, you can see, it's a piece of tin. It's screwed to the bumper. It has a date for registration, and sometimes it'll tell you type of vehicle it's supposed to be on or something like that, so you don't have a commercial plate on your Subaru Impreza. But piece of metal doesn't tell anybody my location other than when they can literally look at my car. And those people that can look at my car, all they know is my license plate number. Why do I go off on this big diatribe? Because Remote ID broadcasts that information. It broadcasts your home location, where you took off, not your home address, but where you took off, so where you're standing with the drone, where the drone is, and it gives all your personal information. So it's just broadcast to the world, so that any Karen or any methed up tweaker with the app on their phone can come harass you or accost you and steal all of your drone equipment. Big difference. There's a big difference. So, as you can see, I'm no fan of Remote ID. I think that it is a terrible idea. Well, why did the FAA or Congress, who mandated the FAA, do something, which I don't think this is what Congress meant. But what is this being done for? It's for safety, right? There have been no unintentional deaths or even major injuries from model aviation. Nobody's accidentally crashed their drone or their model airplane into a crowd of people and killed somebody. Nobody has crashed their model aircraft into somebody and just maimed them. Yeah, people have gotten cut up a little bit. People have gotten bonked in the head a couple of times. That has happened a couple of times, and that sucks. But it's usually other people at the flying field or flying at the bando, along with those guys. That's usually what happens. Or it's the pilot who's flying that cuts themselves, when I cut my finger with the prop on my drone. So if this is for safety and there's no actual real safety concerns, it's just paranoia. Paranoia is different than a need for safety. Being paranoid that something might happen is different than something that will actually happen. Paranoia in this country is not sufficient for this kind of, frankly, tyrannical freaking directive. The FAA has provided zero supporting evidence. They provided nothing to back their claims as to a need for this, other than we said so. And it seems like almost nobody has really challenged them on that, which is funny. what can you do if you want to comply with the remote ID? Well, buy a brand new DJI. It'll have remote ID built in. You don't have to worry about it. If you build your own drones, planes, whatever, you can buy a remote ID module. They're way bigger than you want to put in your aircraft, and they're far more expensive than you want to pay, which is another lie that the FAA said, because they said, oh, they'd be cheap as chips and plentiful as fucking clovers, right? You go outside, you can just pick them off the ground for free, effectively. And there's been about 3 or 4 modules, I think, that have come out, and most of them are $80 to $300. Yet another pile of bullshit from the FAA. And the third way, FRIAs. It's an FAA recognized identification area. What this is a field that the AMA will control, because nobody's getting them approved aside from the AMA so far. And it's just their local flying field that you're not allowed to fly your quad at anyway, but that's where you can fly without having a module or anything installed, because as long as you stay within the boundaries, they know that it's RC aircraft. Which reminds me, let's take a step back to that safety thing, right? Okay. Remote ID is not going to be broadcast, it's not going to be shown, it's not going to be on the screens of air traffic control in any way. Air traffic controllers will not have any more idea that there is a drone flying around their airport than they do today, unless one of the air traffic controllers gets bored and pulls out the app on their own personal phone. So it certainly doesn't increase safety of the skies, which is what, the big thing. Oh, we're going to have millions of drones in the skies. They're just going to be crashing into planes every fucking day, just bringing down airliners. Hasn't happened once yet. So air traffic controllers aren't going to know where your drone is. It's only going to be the tweakers and the Karens. That's it. So if you go fly at a FRIA, for the average person, means you're going to have to drive 150 miles to the local AMA field, and by the time you get there, because of traffic and the distance, and you had to stop and take a leak and get gas, you'll have 25 minutes to fly before they close, because it's run by some 87-year-old dude who has to go home and take his afternoon dump. FRIAs are just not a viable thing for the average person. And the fact that I can't get my own personal 4 acres out here in the middle of fucking farm country in Tennessee registered as a FRIA for myself proves the point. I should be able to just say, hey, this is the Tony flying field, my home location, this is where I fly. If anybody's flying here, it's fucking Tony. But they won't let me do that because it's a private residence and can't have that as a FRIA. The FAA has already started denying tons and tons and tons of applications for FRIAs because they are just not a viable location, or because people wanted to get their homes identified as a FRIA, understandably and reasonably. Another point that the FAA said, oh yeah, no, there's just going to be fucking tons and tons of FRIAs. Don't you worry, there'll be one on every corner like a Starbucks. And they said that in court, if I remember correctly. So what happened there, FAA? Another thing that they need to explain. Big questions that people are talking about recently, like, oh, well, who's going to enforce this? Who's going to enforce this? It's a federal thing, so the local cops... No, yeah, the local cops absolutely are. There's already just tons of cops in this country that just have an absolute raging hard-on for harassing anybody, let alone people with drones. The LEAP. If you haven't looked it up, look it up. There's 3 videos on the FAA's YouTube channel that talk about LEAP and how law enforcement should work and stuff. They have the LEAP, L-E-A-P, the Law Enforcement Assistance Program. There's a webpage on the FAA website, and it describes all about it. And I foresee 2 scenarios. You're going to have the granted few, but still large number of wildly overzealous, ignorant police officers that the kind that like to just harass people in general. They are just going to be overstepping their boundaries, and they're going to be confiscating drones when they're not allowed to. They're going to be arresting people for resisting and not identifying and a bunch of other stuff, because the FAA is telling them that you have to show them your trust card or your 107. So when they come up to you and they ask for that, if you don't provide it, you have now disobeyed a lawful order, which technically it is, and it's a failure to identify. And in most states, that's an arrestable offense. So now not only are you being handcuffed and put in the back of a car, the average person is going to have a bad shoulder or sneeze or shift just the wrong way that the cop's going to be stop resisting, and now you get a resisting charge. Or you just do the confused, what did I do? What did I do? What did I do? Because you're trying to figure out what the fuck you did, and now you're resisting because they're trying to put cuffs on you, and you're just trying to get them to answer a question. On top of that, your drone's being confiscated, your car's being impounded, your dog's being sent to the fucking, to the pound. Because a cop saw you flying a drone and had a wild hair up his ass. I promise you that's going to happen. Promise you it's going to happen because it already happens. It's been happening for years. The other thing with that the other side of that is the cops that just couldn't give a shit less about Timmy flying his fucking airplane in the park. Just quit fucking bothering little Timmy. That's his mentality. I don't care. It's little Timmy in the park or old Joe Bob. They're not doing nothing. They're just flying their fucking plane in the park. Those people, those cops are going to get highly irritated and they're going to just completely stop answering drone calls. So you're going to have a, granted small percentage, but still large number of pricks just dropping the heel on people. And then you're going to have the rest of the guys that are just like, fuck, I don't care. Now, if it is little Timmy down at the park and the cop shows up, guess who's paying the bill? It ain't little Timmy because he's a minor. It's mom and dad. So now mom and dad got to take days off of work and go to court for little Timmy flying his fucking drone down at the park. These are all problems here, right? Blatant oversights that nobody apparently thought about in any way. Or at least, not outside the FAA. And if the FAA did, it shows the literal malice written into these regulations. I guess kind of the last thing on this type of thing. We were talking about the Karens and tweakers, right? So with remote ID on your aircraft, anybody who downloads one of the apps should be able to see where your drone is in the sky and where you are standing as you're flying it. Those of us who fly FPV, even if you have a spotter with you, you can't exactly see what's going on because you're under the hood, right? So, Skittery McCreeper Tweak, hiding in the bushes, sees you flying your drone, says, ooh, those goggles look like they're probably worth some money. Ooh, that transmitter looks pretty pricey. Ooh, look at that fancy backpack with all them parts and stuff in it. Ooh, look, there's some drones. Yeah, I can get money off of that. Before you know it, you're beaten and bloody, laying on the ground with all of your stuff stolen. And they took your car to boot. Because they knew exactly where you were, and they knew that you had high-value equipment with you. Guaranteed. Just by dint of you popping up on the app. 100%. And not just some cheap Android phone and some iPods or whatever. No, you got gear on you that's worth money. Because everybody knows that DJI drones are damn near $2,000, right? So even if they're just thinking, ooh, I'm going to go get me a Mavic, I can hawk that thing for $500. It's worth $2,000. I got everything with it right here. Now they stumble on somebody half of the FPV guys who have saved up for 3 years to build up the fucking gear that they got, but now they got $2,000 worth of gear, and they're going out and ripping. Tweaker just, man, I hit the mother load. Which brings me to a personal point that I would like to express here that I haven't heard anybody but myself say. Drone pilots, model aviation enthusiasts, please listen to me on this point. If you live in the United States particularly, go purchase a firearm. Go get training with that firearm. Practice with that firearm regularly. If your state requires you to have a CCW permit, a concealed carry permit, to carry a weapon, go get that permit. It's expensive, it's a pain in the ass, it sucks, I know, I've done it before. Do it. And then carry that weapon with you at all times, at least when you are carrying thousands of dollars of drone and model aviation gear with you. Keep yourself safe, protect yourself, because I promise you these tweaker fucks are going to come and find you if you're using remote ID. They try and find you even if you're not. Please, do something to actually protect yourself. If you're not comfortable with a firearm, carry pepper spray. Please go get the strongest stuff you can get. Active Self-Protection likes that palm pepper spray. Carry a tool to defend yourself. Practice with it. Wow. I hit the recording limit. It was a good place for it to stop anyway. I was going to start ranting if it didn't. But seriously, protect yourselves, because you're going to need it. Learn to protect yourself. Practice protecting yourself so that when you need to protect yourself, you can do it without thought. Another point to the FAA and why remote ID is just horseshit. Okay, so in the airspace above me right now, I could hop into a manned airplane without any radio of any form, with no anti-collision lights, no beacon, nothing. Just a fucking airplane. Soar off into the wild blue yonder. No one could legally stop me. I mean, yeah, I couldn't do it in a 747 or, even a DC-3. But there's aircraft in the United States, many aircraft in the United States, where it's absolutely legal to fly in Class G, uncontrolled airspace, without a radio of any form. No communications radio, no transponder beacon, no EPLARs, no, nothing. Nothing. Absolutely zero. You don't have to take your cell phone. You could chuck that fucker out the window on the runway and take off. Absolutely legal. But to fly over my own house with a drone, I'm going to be required to have a transponder beacon in it. How does that balance? Now, people like Bardwell would say, well, there's the skin in your teeth, or skin in the game thing, right? Well, that's a fallacy. That's a fallacy. Because if they're worried about safety and, people crashing into other airplanes and, doing terrorist-y things or whatever, that wouldn't matter. Because we've all heard of kamikazes and suicide bombers. If it were like that, if somebody was just going to go cause fucking ruckus and they're getting in an airplane, they're probably not caring about getting back out of the airplane. I mean, that's really just, you don't need to argue beyond that. Like, that's just, that's a fallacy, the, skin in the game thing. Like, oh, yeah, okay, well, maybe for, like, the average person, but no. This doesn't balance. It just absolutely doesn't balance. And the FAA needs to answer for that. Okay. And I'd like to get to something that's, may sound a little more like beef, but it's not. And I'll start it with this. Bardwell, Blunty, guys like you guys. I love you guys. Don't get me wrong. But we as the model aviation community are complicit. We allowed this to happen. People talk about, 50,000 some odd comments on the NPRM. It's really not that many when you look at other fucking industries. And especially when you take into account that, like, other industries and stuff, there's a lot more absolutely unique entries. Not just a lot of copy and paste, which is what this community did in many, many cases there. So that really wasn't that dramatic. It was good, but not that dramatic. And the FAA didn't concede anything to us because of a single comment that we made. Aside from the ones that were saying, yeah, this technology doesn't even exist. If anything, that's what made them go, oh, wait, yeah, shit. That network remote ID thing, we're going to have to wait on that. It's not, oh, okay, fine, we left it off. You guys didn't like it, so you got us. We left it off. No, it says at this time we're not doing it. So that means that for this set of regulations, it's not happening. But later on, abso-fucking-lutely, they're coming back to wedge that in. What should have been happening, alongside the comments on the NPRM, is exactly what the Second Amendment advocates in this country do. People in 2A community, what we do whenever there's a new bullshit law like this pistol brace rule thing that's going on. Not only did everybody comment on the pistol brace rule, which it went through anyway. Actually, I don't know. I think that's part of the problem is the pistol brace rule didn't actually even go through a comment period. Might be thinking of bump stocks. But anyway, digressing. On top of that, we call our representatives. We call our congressmen and senators. We call them regularly. We call them often. And we say, hey, listen here, bucko. You want to keep that nice fancy leather seat with that swanky freaking oak desk? You want to keep getting those lobbyist bucks? Well, then you better do what the fuck we say in this fucking issue because we're the ones that keep you in that seat. And if you don't do what we say, you damn well better believe that there'll be somebody sitting in that seat next election cycle. As far as I know, not a single person did that in our case. As far as I know, nobody did that. I did. Wrote a letter to the president. A lot of good it did, considering I was probably the only one. So, yes, we allowed this to happen. We, as the community, myself included, allowed this to happen. People like me who registered a drone, we allowed this to happen. We told the FAA, like, no, yeah, cool, the door's open, through our actions and our responses to the things they were telling us. Instead of telling them, how about go fuck yourself, we said, okay. And the FAA got a little bit closer. And like the mouse that you gave a cookie, he said, cool, now I want some milk. And then we went, fuck, we don't want to give you milk, but fine. And now the mouse wants a bath. If you don't know that story, go look up If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. I'm sure a lot of you know that story. And that's exactly what happened here. And we, as the model aviation community, allowed it to happen. Now granted, after that first drone registration that I did, the first and only, I realized what was going on and came to my senses. It doesn't seem like many more people have, though. And this is a point that I've tried to argue with Bardwell really hard to do via his chat in his live stream. What happened to all the protests? We had one protest at the FAA in DC. I personally couldn't go, so I tried to get people to do it in my local area. Not a single person was fucking interested. I said, hey, let's go down to the FSDO in San Diego, when I was out in San Diego, and protest out there too. So that the West Coast sees what the fuck is going on. Not a single person listened. And me being a small YouTube channel with only like 10 people that are FPV pilots that pay attention to me at all, I didn't even bother making a video because it wasn't worth it. Because after commenting that all over the fucking place on the internet, nobody responded. Nobody was like, ooh, that's a good idea. Not a single person. So what happened? Nothing. So how many protests have there been? One. How many did Rotor Riot alone? How many did Ledrib say there would be? I remember him saying, as often and as many as it takes.
The protest was held in February on the last day to submit comments. Let the FAA know why their proposal is problematic. And we'll go back to Washington as many times as it takes to make sure that the world actually knows that, first off, we exist and that what we do is worth saving.
Haven't seen it. So who's responsible for that? Us, the model aviation community, the drone pilots of America. We are responsible for that. We are the ones who have done nothing. And in this case, frankly, not we, but you guys. Because I've tried to get people. Granted, I could have tried harder, but I also do have a life too. And as much as I like model aviation, if y'all aren't going to back me, why should I back you anymore? That's kind of how it starts to feel. And that is where Bruce Simpson's frustration comes, Joshua. That is why it sounds like to you that he's victim blaming. It's not that he's victim blaming. You can be a victim and still be at fault. And that's what the case is. We are victims of the FAA, but we are at fault still. And yes, had we listened to people like Bruce or me not too long after, we probably wouldn't be in this situation. We probably wouldn't be. If we hadn't registered our drones, if we had just thumbed our nose at the FAA from the beginning, they would have went like, well, crap, we've gotten 0% as opposed to several 100,000, registrations. That's a lot. That's a lot. And I'm sorry, that's mass compliance, according to the way the government works. I don't mean to sound like I'm just saying fuck you, Bardwell, or anything like that, or belittling you, but it is our fault. Now, to address the point about people like Dave Messina and It's Blunty, guys that are earnestly doing their best for us. I want to clarify this. Thank you. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for putting in the effort that you do. You guys, I appreciate what it is that you have been attempting to accomplish. Having served in the military and dealt with government organizations, I know that it's like paddling uphill through a fucking avalanche. And that was basically Bruce's whole point. If you've ever tried to kayak uphill through an avalanche, if you could even imagine that, that's what it's like trying to get anything from a government organization. Anything that could remotely be close to considered a concession. You're paddling uphill in an avalanche in a kayak. And I appreciate that you guys just have the fortitude to keep fucking doing it. So thank you. Thank you. Legitimately, thank you. No one's saying to stop what you're doing. I don't think even Bruce is saying that. He's just saying that if we all rely on you guys alone, if nobody else does anything, but, we got Dave Messina on the ark, so cool, right? No. Every little baby step they give you is 5 steps back in the other direction. So if the rest of us don't do shit, it's a badly losing game. That's the point. We all need to get on board. We all need to get on board today before it's too late. Because it's already too late. The regulations are there. Removing regulations from the CFR is fucking unheard of. Like, it's so hard to do. Unless they're found, unconstitutional, which is why the ATF gets screwed so much. But it's going to be really hard because we've waited this long. Because there's only been one lawsuit, which Ray Staquad should be refiling that same lawsuit because the FAA lied directly about things they said in that court case. They said that, we're not going to be storing data. It's not going to be logged on the database. Any old freaking Joe Cop isn't going to be able to fucking download it. And this video that they just put out says exactly that. So Ray Staquad should be fucking suing them again. And anybody who can fucking scrape together enough money to talk to a lawyer should be doing the same thing and starting a GoFundMe, because I guarantee the rest of us who can only fucking pitch in $20 here and there will do it, and it'll add up quick just like it did for Ray Staquads. We need to be suing from many, many angles, in as many district courts as possible. That's how the Second Amendment fighters work. This whole thing with the pistol braces, it's in 4 or 5 different circuits right now. And that's for a reason. We should be doing the exact same thing, because if one judge says one thing, another might say another thing, which means that the third one has to look at both of those other cases. And they might say the same thing as the one guy. And the more people we get on that pile on our side, the better. And the higher we can push it, the better. Because if it has to go to the Supreme Court, then fucking great. Having SCOTUS weigh in on this would be amazing. But that's what needs to be done. On top of that, every one of us should be calling regularly the DC switchboard. If you don't have the number for your direct representative, if you don't have their direct office number, you should be calling the DC switchboard. I'll put the number on the screen, all right? I'll put the number on the screen. I'm going to read it to you here. It's 202 3121. 3121. It's the DC switchboard. I'm going to give it to you again. 202 224 3121. Now go back, reverse, tap that arrow key back 5 seconds. Get that number down. That's the DC switchboard. You call that number. You ask for your state representative or for your district or whatever. If you don't know who they are, you should, but that's fine. You tell them, hey, my name is Richard Johnson from fucking Schmucksville, Iowa. I'm sorry I don't know who my representative is, but I need to talk to them. No problem. Let me look that up for you. Okay, let me transfer you. They're going to transfer you to their office. Their answering secretary or whatever's going to answer. And you say, hello, my name is Richard Johnson from bumfuck, Iowa. I would like to talk about remote ID and why it is a terrible, terrible idea. Say, look, sir, ma'am, thank you for being there, for taking my call. I'd like to talk to you about remote ID and why I think it's a horrible idea and why it needs to be, at a minimum, redone entirely. And you express all of these points we've talked about today, and all these other people have, the good points that other people have made in their videos. These videos do nothing without this kind of attention. Because even if we get all this stuff in the media and get the broader public looking at this, like Bruce wants, which is a fan-fucking-tastic idea, it does nothing if our representatives aren't hearing about it. Because they might see it in the media, but they see all kinds of stuff on TV and on their socials that they don't care about. We need to be calling them and telling them, hey, the FAA overreached. They stepped out of bounds. They took what you guys said and just fucking ran with it. You need to reel them back in. And again, you tell them that because if they want to stay in office and keep getting those lobbyist bucks, they need to do what they tell us on this one. Congress mandated this in the first place. Congress is the only ones that will be able to change anything. We need to tell them not only about the 1 kilogram, I think it should be 1.5 kilogram limit, but hey, I'll take a kilo. I'd rather have that 1.5 kilos, but I'll take a kilo. That needs to be going up. The broadcast remote ID bullshit needs to go the fuck away. Most of the other regulations are fair. Most people don't care about going over 400 feet, like flying over people and stuff, like staying away from airports. Like, most of that stuff is like common sense shit that we all have no problem with. Which is another reason remote ID is so irritating, because it's unnecessary. It's wholly unnecessary. I did want to mention the AMA, because they're more useless than the NRA when it comes to the fucking gun industry. Like, the AMA has only their interests in mind, and they were so short-sighted that they've shot themselves in the foot too, because a bunch of AMA fields probably aren't going to be, approved as FRIAs, and like it's not going to work out for them. And instead of backing the hobbyists, the actual hobby, the people that support the AMA, they back the FAA. So if you have an AMA membership, I would say maybe don't renew, because they probably aren't worth your money. The AMA, they're absolutely complicit in this. Absolutely, unquestionably complicit in this. And that's a problem. All right, guys. It's starting to get a little bit hot and starting to get a little humid and sweaty in here. I think you can see my forehead glistening. I'm going to go in, edit this up, and hopefully get this posted soon. Please, seriously, please, call your representatives. Call your state reps and your senators and tell them that this needs to go away. Explain all of these reasons. Take up their time. That's what they get paid for, is to listen to you. They're your representative. They're there to represent you. So please absolutely call them. And call them regularly until we see some change. Thanks for your time, guys. Have a good one. Stay safe.